There's a lot of ideas and concepts that we come back to a lot in Unity. And one of the most predominant ideas is the simple idea that our thoughts make a difference. That ideas held in mind and lifted up to spirit can create after their kind. That we are co-creators with God. And so we learn affirmations and denials and basic principles and ideas which we can move forward with, which will hopefully transform our lives. This is an incredibly valuable idea, concept, and lesson. In my experience, I seem to have found that with powerful ideas like this, there's an easy message, and then another slightly more difficult one. When it comes to manifestations and affirmations, the easy message, I think, is simply that we can. We can transform our lives, and indeed the world, through the thoughts that we choose to hold and lift up. Slightly more challenging lesson is that we're not blank slates. We don't simply start out sitting here and just thinking anything we want. Already there are tons of thoughts, ideas, and concepts that we are manifesting and creating every day in our lives. And the other thing is that these things aren't just simple little thoughts. So often we seem to describe our thinking as simply positive thoughts and negative thoughts. That all we need to do is go through them and separate them like we're selecting pictures for a family photo album. This one looks great. That's very positive. We're going to put that in there. And we're smiling in that one. In truth, it's a bit more complicated. For the last 2 years, I've been studying at my local community college. And certain ideas and concepts seem to keep coming up, time and again, from philosophy classes to sociology, psychology, anthropology. And the idea is simply that we as human beings are essentially storytelling creatures. As long as we have existed as a society, as a group together, we've been telling stories. And these stories aren't simply meant to entertain or educate. These stories form the very foundation of our lives. We enact these stories. These stories inform our values and opinions. And it's through these stories that all of our experiences are filtered as we shape our worldview. Most of these stories serve us. Right now, in this moment, for instance, we have a story that we're all living. That we are congregants sitting in a room that serves as a church. That right now there is a talk going on, and this story allows you to feel comfortable in what would otherwise be a situation where there's a whole bunch of people in a very small area and one person that just keeps talking. But this story allows you to know how to behave, to be calm and receptive. One of the reasons this story works is simply because it's true. There are other stories that we tell that aren't so true. There's a couple ways that I think we can recognize some of these false stories. Stories that might misserve us, or lead us to live lives that are contrary to the lives we truly wish to live. One of these is to simply watch out for a very simple little word. They. These stories that use this they most often relate to other people. Politically, we often refer to the party different than our own as they. Those Republicans, those Democrats, they don't care about our country. They don't care about me. They are going to just ruin this entire nation. With all the news about the Occupy movement, the one thing that seemed to alarm me most was this hateful rhetoric towards the 1%, the wealthiest. This idea that they the 1% are greedy and corrupt, that they are evil. Anytime we take a group of people, categorizing them by one characteristic, and then assign a bunch of other qualities to them, we know we've made a mistake. Because we're all unique and different. In the case of criticizing that top 1%, there's a couple dangers that I immediately see, and that's, firstly, that these wealthy individuals are no longer allowed to be charitable or noble. No matter what they do, they are told that they are evil and they are corrupt. But moreover, we tell ourselves that any time that we work towards a state to improve our own financial situation, that any time we desire to have some wealth ourselves, we have to do it through greed, through being evil and corrupt. Watching for those days can clearly show us some of the false stories that might be shaping our very lives. Another important tool that I think I've found or used is the simple idea of asking, well, what evidence do I have for this? What evidence do I have for this? When slavery was first abolished in this nation, there was a major question of what to do with all of these freedmen. For generations, they were treated as little more than property. And now they have their lives. There's a question of what place do they have? Some fairly educated and intellectual gentlemen in society looked at the black Americans, recently freed, and made several observations. Well, none of them could read or write, and hardly knew anything formally, so clearly they were naturally unintelligent. There's no point, therefore, in putting them in schools, trying to teach them anything. Most of them were prone to sickness and illness, lived very short lives. So clearly they're naturally given to illness, and we should keep them in their own little areas. This story about African Americans early on led to the enacting of that story, because people embraced a story that said that they weren't capable of intelligence. They weren't given the opportunity for education. Because people embraced a story that said that they were naturally ill and weak, they weren't given medical treatment, or even the opportunity for healthy living quarters. Now in our own lives, we perhaps don't have these exact situations, nor do we subscribe to these particular stories. But we are nonetheless very much so influenced by the stories to which we do subscribe. And these stories can completely shape the way that we even form our affirmations, can completely influence what it is that we even seek to pursue in the first place. My own life, once I felt a calling towards Unity ministry, I knew it was time to go back to college. Not having much money and having spent several years out of school, I moved back home with my parents and went to the local community college. This semester I'll be finishing up my associate's degree. But earlier this year, at the start of the summer, it was time for me to start considering where I would go next. Like many of my peers, I planned on just going to the local university. Maybe at the best, Florida State University or University of Florida. Nobody considered anything greater than that. Nowhere more prestigious. Because we're community college students. We subscribed to the story that said that no one would respect an associate's degree. No one would give us a chance to go to anywhere higher quality than the local university. We believed that those top universities, they didn't care about us. And the evidence we used for our stories was simply the fact that nobody went anywhere else. And then all of a sudden I realized, wait a second, I don't know anybody who's even tried for anywhere else. Recognizing some of these false stories, I took a moment and I stopped. I said, well, if I could go to any university, anywhere in the world, guaranteed admission, full ride, where would I go? The answer for me was Oxford. The University of Oxford. Without argument, one of the best universities in the entire world. Even after this idea came to me, the part of me thought, well, this is just crazy, but why not? I go to Unity. I'll write the application. I'll say my affirmations. We'll see what happens. I allowed for it to happen. And on December 16th, I received a letter from Oxford offering me a place to study for a bachelor's degree in philosophy and theology. This completely violated the stories of so many people, and has reminded me as I move forward to question my own stories, those that remain, both about others and about myself. To question those stories of inadequacy, those stories that say that I'm not good enough, I'm not talented enough. Those stories that say that, well, I'm just inherently messy, I'll never learn how to clean or organize. Stories that say that, well, I can't cook at all, no point in trying. The stories that say that I can't achieve my dreams. While I'm thrilled about the opportunity with Oxford, there's still another story left to overcome. In order to go, I have to actually be able to afford it. Now, there are many people who subscribe to the story that says that universities like Oxford are only for the rich, for the wealthy, for those who have been born into a life of high prestige. The only way that I'm going to be able to make it is by reaching out to others for support. And as I do so, many have turned to me and said that I'm wasting my time. I'm wasting the time of others. That it'll never happen. But I reject that story. And as I move forward, I give myself the opportunity to experience a different reality. I seek to confront those stories which might limit me, which might limit the very reaches of my affirmations, as I strive forward to achieve everything I can. And finally, when it comes to this idea of stories, of recognizing our false stories, a lot of it can start to become rather overwhelming. As you move forward in the coming weeks, I really do encourage you to keep an eye out for those days when you start to recognize any sort of story that has control in your life, whether it's a story of a loved one, or yourself, or your family, to ask, what evidence do I truly have for this? And as we do this, we will really begin to recognize all of the stories that take place in our lives. After a while, it can actually become rather overwhelming. Luckily, when we take this idea of confronting our stories and kick it up a notch, metaphysically speaking, it gets a lot easier. In the 12 Powers of Man by Charles Fillmore, in the section on renunciation or elimination, it talks about the difference between thoughts and ideas. Thoughts, Charles says, are a little more than physical reality. Rather than having 3 dimensions, we can think of them as having 4. And just like we can eat too much food and feel sick to our stomach, sometimes we can start thinking too much, feel sick to our head. Ideas, however, ideas are something greater. Ideas come from that place of the divine. They come from the realm of the spirit. The power of renunciation, or elimination, isn't about picking through our thoughts and eliminating those ones that we deem and judge as negative. It's simply about taking even just a moment, one sweet, simple moment, to release our thoughts. To let those thoughts just fade away. All the stories, good and bad, true and false, to release and allow space for a new idea. And by simply doing this, we can be inspired by the true source, by the divine within us and within everything else. And at that point, when we allow that idea to come forth, that is when we are truly freed from any story which might constrain us or restrict us. Because that is the moment that we become connected to something higher. And in that moment, we can truly manifest our greatest dreams, our glorious ideas, the highest good for ourselves and the world. Because in that moment, we are bound by no stories. So as we move forward, I really encourage us to take a moment, even examining our own ongoing affirmations, and the things we're seeking to manifest, and question whether or not we've put ridiculous limits on it from some false story that we've been perpetuating. To seek out the stories in our lives simply so that we can recognize the power that they have, and then give a moment to release these thoughts and embrace a greater idea. And let us always remember that in all of these endeavors, we're never alone. And right here, we have our Unity family, ready to support us, encourage us, and hold us in the light. And for that, we say thank you.